Hey there, and welcome to The Gathering. My name's Maddie. I'm the online pastor here, and I am so thrilled you decided to join us for worship today. If you haven't yet, be sure to head over and click the subscribe button. Videos like this drop every Sunday and are available on demand all week long, but we also have other content on our page and a kids channel and lots of things for you to explore. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. You can also head to the description of this video to get a link to our website, a link to a way to give, as well as a link to a Connect card, which gives me the chance to reach out and say hello, which I would love to do. So please let me know that you were here. Now, last week, I encouraged you to begin making your Easter plan. Easter Sunday is coming in so hot, and we're going to have 2 services this year, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. over at the factory in the district at Chesterfield. And so I encouraged you to consider which service you plan to attend, which one works well for you. But today I want you to take a moment to think about who you might invite to come with you. Are there friends or family in the area that you would love to have come alongside and come with you to an Easter service? Maybe someone who you think could use the hope and the encouragement that comes with the Easter message and the promise of a fresh start and new life. Whoever that is, I encourage you now to maybe shoot them a text or send them this message or head over to our website and share the event with them. Whatever that looks like for you, I encourage you to consider 2 to 3 people that you might invite to attend Easter Sunday with you this year. All right, that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoy this message. We'll catch you next time.
Hello, good morning. My name is Sarah Rugenstone. I'm the site pastor over at Clayton. It is very good to be here with you this morning. I have a question for you, perhaps a humbling one. Have you ever been super sure that you were right about something, and you go in really overconfident, and then it turns out that you were not right at all? I've done this a few times. If you have not done this, you're on another level. Love that for you. Good job. But like I said, this is something that's happened once or twice in my life. For example, I've always prided myself on my sense of direction. It's pretty good. But there have been a couple of times where I have been too confident in it. For example, when I moved back here a year and a half ago, I was doing things to force myself out of the house. I'm a homebody, but I was committed to going out in the community and reacclimating to being a Midwesterner. One way I was doing this was by going thrifting. So one weekend, I thought to myself, dang, you know where some stellar thrift stores are? Greenville, Illinois, the town where I went to college, and I know how to get there. I have driven that drive literally hundreds of times. It's a good 45 minutes if you drive like I do. So I hop in my car, pop on my true crime podcast, and I hop on old I-55 north to Illinois, and I cruise. It felt so good. I had my windows down. As I passed familiar signs and fields, I zoned into my podcast, and then I saw a huge pink elephant marking a thrift store. Which is interesting, because I have never once seen that before. And that's kind of a hard thing to miss. There was also this old, beautiful church that I had never seen before. And here's the thing about old churches. They're typically not built within the past 6 years. This is when I realized, Sarah, I don't think that you're anywhere near Greenville. So instead of typing it into my map, I just exited and headed in the direction that I assumed Greenville was. And then I was in some fields, and I said, you know what? This could be how I die. Remember that I was listening to a true crime podcast. So finally, I dropped my pride, pulled onto the side of the road. With 1 bar of service, I typed Greenville, and Google told me that I was 30 minutes away. And I'd already been driving for 45 minutes. I followed the maps and came into Greenville a way that I rarely ever drove, and it humbled me. My sense of direction is good, but maybe not when it's been 6 years since I've driven the route. I went in really sure of myself and really overconfident that I would end up where I needed to be without any direction. As you can see, I was sadly mistaken. Today, we're going to be talking about a disciple who is always doing the most and is just about always missing the mark. He thinks he gets it, but Jesus is usually saying something along the lines of, "No, I appreciate your effort, though." And I love this disciple because he is all over the place. He's such a relatable dude. He's faithful. He's not faithful. He walks on water. He, in a fit of passion and rage, cuts a dude's ear off to protect Jesus. And then the literal next day, he denies Jesus. And even still, he becomes the rock upon which Christ builds his church alongside Mary the Tower. But we'll get to Mary the Tower next week. Any guesses who we're talking about this week? It's Peter, our guy who is always doing the most, and he sometimes gets it right? And then he typically displays a pattern of backsliding. And yet he's Peter, the rock. A little bit of backstory on Peter. And when he met Jesus and flipped his life upside down, he's often referred to as Simon, son of John, or Simon Peter. And Peter was a fisherman with his brother, Andrew, along the Sea of Galilee. And it was there that Peter encountered Christ. They were fishing, and Jesus casually goes, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately, Andrew and Peter drop their nets and follow Jesus. That's pretty wild to me. No questions asked. And this is one of the many times where Peter gets it. Jesus tells you to follow, and you do. He demonstrates a deep faith right from the beginning. He's got a good heart, but his actions don't always match it. It's easy to give our guy Peter a hard time, but in a way, Peter is all of us. We're going to focus on some scripture where Peter is on the same wavelength as Jesus. They're ebbing, flowing, vibing. And then we're going to take a look how literal verses later, we have an instance of Peter pretty much completely missing the point entirely. And Jesus absolutely roasts him. He will be needing some aloe for that burn. Hear these words from Matthew 16. Matthew 16, verses 13 through 19 reads, "Now when Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do the people say the human one is?' They replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets.' And he said, 'What about you? Who do you say that I am?' Simon Peter said, 'You are the Christ, the Son of the living God.' Then Jesus replied, 'Happy are you, Simon Peter, because no human has shown this to you. Rather, my God who is in heaven has shown you. I tell you that you are Peter, and I'll build my church on this rock. The gates of the underworld won't be able to stand against it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Anything you fasten on earth will be fastened in heaven. Anything you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven.'" Okay, Peter. Yes, that was right on the nose. Look at him go. And Jesus is super pleased with him. So pleased that he makes Peter the rock upon which the church will be built alongside Mary the Tower. Love to see it. Peter is also feeling himself in this moment. His chest is puffed, his head is big. He's pointing at all the other disciples going, "I didn't hear him call any one of you the rock." Wonder what that's like to not be Jesus's rock. Well, one verse after this, Peter is humbled. Before Jesus arrived in Jerusalem, he predicted his suffering and death to his disciples, but they didn't want to hear it or believe it. Listen to these words from Matthew 16, verses 21 through 23. "From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he had to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and legal experts. And he had to be killed and raised on the third day. Then Peter took a hold of Jesus and, scolding him, began to correct him. "God forbid, Jesus, this won't happen to you." But he turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stone that can make me stumble, for you are not thinking God's thoughts, but human thoughts." Yikes on bikes, that had to have stung. You came in too hot, Pete. This was not the move. Matter of fact, Peter kind of missed Jesus' move entirely here. Jesus was telling them how he was about to live into the truth that Peter had just stated, that Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus knew that he would suffer at the hands of the government, that the state would kill him eventually, but that he would rise again. These are all markers of his true identity as Messiah. I think Jesus would know. And yet, Peter seems to have only absorbed that one part of it, that Jesus will die. And he said, "No, that won't happen." Denial, anybody? But Jesus isn't having it. He says, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't know what you're talking about." And so if you're like, "Dang, that's a bit harsh, Jesus." Actually, it's not. Jesus was probably super frustrated. He'd been teaching these people for years, and now they're reaching the climax of the story, and Peter isn't on the right track. He sort of missed the entire point. This was the time for Peter to get it right. They're days away from Jesus' death, so it's kind of time for the disciples to have the message start clicking. And Peter just did one of these. There was some pressure, and the dude cracked under it. I mean, y'all, how often are we Peter? We get it wrong, and we are human. So often, we too find ourselves certain of how God will show up, how God will act, what God will do. And so often, we are just not even close to right. It's when we hold to our convictions of rightness that we actually cling to something deeply human, a desire to know all. But when we walk with Christ, we must hold that desire to know loosely and hold tight instead to mystery. Pastor Sarah, what do you even mean? I mean that often we get so set, our heels so deeply dug in, that we miss the entire point of what God is trying to do. Because perhaps what God is doing is greater and better than our human minds could possibly comprehend. Peter said, "Nope, Jesus, that's actually not how you're supposed to show up. Let me explain your identity of the Messiah to you." And Jesus said, "No, turn around, get behind me, and come back correct." When do we do this in our own lives? We not only do this to Christ, but our own siblings. How often do we tell people that they're to show up one way that fits our own comfortability and understanding of the world, when God is actively calling the other person to be fully them, fully who God has called them to be? What right do we have to become a stumbling block in the lives of others? When is Christ saying to us the harsh, cutting correction he gave Peter? "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stone that can cause me to stumble." As an example, Christians ourselves have historically been stumbling blocks to groups of people, our queer siblings in particular. How often the church has shown up as a stone that could make people stumble. How often have we forced the wrong understanding of someone's own identity on them out of a misguided drive to be right and know all? Or sometimes we do that because that's how we needed to digest and comprehend them when God is actively inviting them to be fully themselves. Well, Jesus says to us, when we completely miss somebody's identity, that we need to get behind him and come correct. Otherwise, we become a stumbling block to that person living into their fullest self, who God called them and made them to be. The urge to know and understand everything is often based out of fear and control. Peter's actions and comments show us that, remember, it says that Peter took a hold and scolding him, began to correct him. God forbid, Lord, this won't happen to you. He was scared. He didn't like the potential outcomes that Jesus had just listed off. He wanted to protect and control Jesus and how Jesus' journey to his full self would play out. We see this very human emotion of fear and control play out today against our LGBTQIA siblings all the time. Attempts to control how they exist, attempts to stoke fear about what could happen if we allow people to show up fully as themselves, attempts to minimize them, to make them digestible to our narrow minds, attempts to shake them and scold them for daring to lean into who God called them to be. Shame on us for when we have been stumbling blocks, and shame on us when we have tried to correct the image of God that stares back at us in another person. But here's the thing that's different about Peter. What stands out about him is actually the opposite of a lot of American Christians today. Peter got behind Jesus again. He went, oh, and got back in place. He realigned himself with Christ, and that is what we can learn from our friend Peter. We get it right when we keep trying. It's in the moments where we cling to our human need to be right and know that we need to listen to the voice of God telling us to get back in line. When we try to explain to someone who they are, who God made them out to be, know that God is shaking God's head and nudging you to shut up and get behind Christ again. We're invited to embrace the reality that we do not know everything, and we never will. We're invited to embrace living in mystery and curiosity and wonder. It's there that God reveals the most beautiful things. When we get it wrong, we're invited to align ourselves with God again and try again with an approach of wonder rather than an approach of human knowledge. Because our own understanding falls so short. It doesn't even scratch the surface of what God is doing or how God works. Peter shows us that at our core, we are human. We will get it wrong. We will mess up, but we are always invited to try again and get back in line with Christ. He gets some stuff wrong, but he also gets some stuff right, and then drops the ball immediately after, sure. But it's his heart. It's his drive and his passion to constantly be trying, failing, and slowly progressing towards a better, more true version of himself, the rock. His spirit of audacity, authenticity, and humility, he knows with the deepest depths of his soul that he was made to follow Jesus. We see it when he drops the net and follows Jesus. We see it when he walks out to Jesus on the sea. We see it when he meets Jesus after the resurrection. Jesus' first and last words to Peter are, "Follow me." And Peter did. Jesus has a lot of love for Peter. He's always correcting the guy, but he never ousts him. Jesus is saying through this friendship, I know Peter messes up, he's human, but it doesn't stop him from continuously striving and attempting to be better for me. I think if we can be like Peter and accept our human propensity to get things wrong, but always be striving to get it right, to do better, to follow Christ how Christ wants us to, we can let go of our need for rightness. What we can't do is freeze up when we get it wrong and be stuck in a state of inaction. We never see that with Peter. Even when he's wrong, the guy is doing something, okay? He's trying again and again and again. Jesus corrects him, probably rolling his eyes at Peter a couple of times, but that is okay. This is a process that we never finish in this life. Thank goodness we have a God of grace who nudges us back in line when we fall short. In the act of trying, we are pursuing getting it right. Risk putting your foot in your mouth. I've learned to get so much comfortable with the reality that I will put my foot in my mouth at least once a week. I see a lot of people freeze up around certain topics, whether it be politics or like race or LGBTQ subjects. People can freeze and be stuck in a state of fear and unknowing. And not wanting to say anything wrong, you don't say anything at all. I've done this myself, friends. I've said the wrong thing and I've done the wrong actions, and I've gotten stuck there out of fear of getting it wrong again. But in our frozen, silent state, we also speak volumes. We're saying maybe we're not willing to get it wrong again. We're not willing to step into the scary space of not understanding and not knowing. But what we learn from Peter is that he sets an example of being someone who is so authentically themselves. He's showing up with a lot of audacity, and sometimes he's right on the nose, and sometimes he's way off base. But regardless, you can count on him to be Peter. And you can count on him having the humility to get back in line with Jesus. God meets us in our authenticity. We learn from Peter to be fully ourselves, to show up in all of our human messiness. What I love so much about Jesus and Peter's friendship is that Jesus loves this man even when Peter is so all over the place. Jesus builds his church upon Peter and Mary, two people who mess up. They're human, and yet they're always striving and always trying to follow and pursue God with their entire beings. God meets us there. God meets us in our strong convictions and often meets us with something that will shake even the strongest of convictions. May we have grace for ourselves when we're nudged and corrected. We were not made to be right. We were made to be curious, to wonder, and to create. And God rejoices when we lean into those things, when we get it right, when we are faithful, and when we follow. So we know there's a little bit of Peter in us, but we also need to talk about the Peter that's in other people. Let's seek to meet others, because people will misunderstand us, get things wrong that we really care about. They'll deny the truth that is right in front of them. And wow, that can be frustrating. But friends, if they have the humility to come back, to say I was wrong, and to try again, may we have grace for them, for that audacity to be so wrong, but humble enough to admit it. Peter is probably most famous for his biggest flop, denying that he knew Jesus. He thought he would never let his Messiah down. Do you know the guilt of Peter? The guilt of having gotten something so wrong, the burden of denying the truth of a friend, the weight of your human need for rightness. As we close today, I want to show you something. This is a drawing that I drew of Peter for our Maundy Thursday service last year. I was trying to convey the weight of the guilt that he must have felt. And I invite you to ponder this depiction of Peter. When has this been you? When has this been someone you know? According to the Gospel of John, after the resurrection, upon hearing that Jesus is on the shore, Jesus gets out of the boat again and swims to Jesus, and Jesus meets him there. Peter's sopping wet, ragged, and out of breath from his swim. Jesus has him eat. And then when he's done, Jesus sits him down and corrects Peter's 3 denials by asking him 3 times if he loves him. Each time, Peter says, yes, of course. And with each question, Jesus invites Peter to get back in line with him. With each question, he invites Peter to go out and try again. Each time he asks the question, he pulls off more and more of the weight and guilt that Peter had been carrying. Hear these words from John 21:15. When they finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Simon replied, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. Jesus asked a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon replied, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said to him, take care of my sheep. He asked a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He replied, Lord, you know everything. You know I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. I assure you that when you were younger, you tied your own belt and walked around wherever you wanted. When you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and another will tie your belt and lead you where you don't want to go. He said this to show the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And after saying this, Jesus said to Peter, follow me. Jesus' final words to Peter, follow me. An invitation out of the guilt, out of the shame, out of the heaviness, and into the wonder, curiosity, and into the love and grace that you find with a life with Christ. Friends, whenever you find yourself burdened with the guilt of getting something wrong, remember Jesus always invites us back. Jesus promises to remove any weight that is making it hard to move and constantly invites you into something better. Jesus said to Peter, follow me. Jesus says the same thing to you here today. Will you pray with me? God, who always invites us back, we thank you. We are grateful for that invitation. God, may we be people who are audaciously ourselves, who aren't scared of getting it wrong, who are eager to jump back in line with you when we do mess up. Stir within us our own spirit of Peter, his boldness, audacity, his heart for you. May we always be trying, God. May we always be attempting to grow more into who you've called us to be. Grant us grace for ourselves and others when we get it wrong. May we always remember your invitation back to you. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen.